everyone for joining us today, our fellow panelists and everyone who's on this webinar today in partnership with Business World and Randstad, the Randstad Leadership Dialogues. It's a very important topic that we're digging into today. I'll keep my opening comments brief and we can follow up with some questions later. I would just look back for a moment. When I arrived back to Bangor, here in Bangor from Delhi, March 15th, certainly had no idea that we were about to go into complete lockdown mode. Randstad, with 75 offices across the country, went from business as usual to business as unusual. In 2 days, 48 hours, every single employee across the four corners of the country, from Guwahati all the way down to Kochi, were at home. And our first response was to ensure that people were safe. And I've been meeting and discussing with a lot of CXOs over the past few months. In fact, my last count, I'm at 500 face-to-face, one-to-one meetings so far since March. All virtual, of course. And I'm hearing the same story. All leaders shifted into let's protect ourselves and our people immediately. That was the first phase, so safety. Then we looked at how can we engage, and the engagement activities have been remarkable. I must say, working for a global company like Randstad, India is constantly in the spotlight of Randstad with all the cool initiatives that we do here on engagement. Everything from launching a radio station to Zumba to yoga and cooking and so on. I mean, incredible creativity in India, the most connected country perhaps on the planet. And then we shifted to productivity. How do we continue to move the wheels? And to Dr. Kadia's point about we never really left work, I think we all agree that we're busier than ever. So the next phase is really about what's next, and that's what we're here to talk about today. How can we continue to ensure that people are safe while also moving the wheels more quickly? Productivity, output, getting the economy going, protecting lives as well as livelihood. That's where we're at now, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Very proud to say that we launched this handbook, which is entitled Safely Back to Work. And I would take a note of Dr. Kalia's comment and say, safely back to the workplace, wherever that place is. Maybe we should add place at the end of safely back to work. I would agree, because we work from anywhere now. Let me just tell you a little bit about how it began. Randstad, as a company that is covering 39 countries, we have about 92% of the global GDP within our reach in the markets where we operate. And in India alone, we put 60,000 people to work every day. So this is a very important responsibility. Safety is at the center of everything we do. A safe environment, of course, and an environment where our employees are cared for. Now, this crisis began, as we know, in China, and that's one of the countries where we have a large presence, like many multinationals. Then it started to move from country to country, as we all know, as it happened. In a strange way, India has the benefit of being later on the curve, or we had the benefit. And that gave us the opportunity to learn from other countries, and we did that. So what happened was in April, as the crisis started to loom and the COVID was spreading through Europe, an idea was born with Randstad and McKinsey. The idea was to come up with safely back to work protocols for the world. And who better to do that than someone who employs hundreds of thousands of people every single day and puts them to work across all industries, across countries. So we actually came together with Adecco and Manpower. So the top 3 staffing and recruiting companies in the world. This is an unprecedented effort. If you think about your top 2 direct competitors that you go toe to toe with every day, we actually checked our competitive spirit at the door and we said, let's come together shoulder to shoulder to help the world get back to work. It's really a remarkable effort. And again, with McKinsey's support pro bono, we started to develop these protocols based on best practices across borders. And we launched these handbooks in different countries. India was then in progress, and we brought in a company called GI Group as well to support us. We've since had sector bodies like NASSCOM and OP and others come and support us on this journey. Now, the best practices, the protocols that are in this handbook cover all the major industries in India. I won't list them all up, there's 7, but you can imagine they're all the key industries that we all operate in. From manufacturing right over to frontline retail, fast-moving consumer goods. And certainly there are the nuts and bolts of protocols on the how-to. We know the why, lives and livelihood. The why is crystal clear. The how. So we have a very useful handbook that has takeaways, posters, and so on that can be used for organizations to help people get back to work. We also talk a lot about the mental health piece, the emotional health piece, which is equally important, as we've all discovered. And at Randstad as well, we've taken on a partner called Your Dose, which is an EAP organization, and they've been wonderful. We have since extended that service to our 60,000 contingent workers for Randstad. Something I think we're the first in the world to do that within the world of Randstad. So coming back to the handbook, This has been received very well from sector bodies, from government here in India, and also from companies who are looking for that trigger moment, as the doctor mentioned, of when to allow people to come back to the workplace. And of course, everyone who's participating in the webinar today, you will receive a link after the webinar where you can download. I look at this as open source code. It's for everyone. No one owns it. We all share it. And so by all means, please leverage this. It's been created for India based on global best practices. And so, safely back to work is really about two things. It's about the physical safety, but it's also about the emotional and mental safety. And Anurag, what we've discovered in all of our surveys in India and beyond is most people are afraid to go back to the office. There's still a high fear factor. Now that may come down over time. If I look at the Netherlands, where our world headquarters is, certainly the fear factor has come down comparatively to India. In China, it's also come down from being extremely high, where 90% of people didn't want to come to the office, and now it's coming down to 70 to 60 to 50. In India, we are still quite high, and we're seeing most studies are showing that in most organizations, 70 to 80% of people don't want to come back to the office. And one conclusion from the handbook is we can create safe spaces in our offices. We can ensure they are clean zones and safe zones. But what we can't control is what happens between point A and point B. And that's where the biggest concern is. In other words, when someone walks out of their home and travels to the office, whether they're taking the metros and taxis and so on. And so some of our recommendations in the handbook is how do we handle the A to B portion of this story, not only the workplace. And so that's in a nutshell what the handbook is all about. And I look forward to sharing it with everyone else. Another great question. I happen to be leading a global, what am I going to call it? I don't like the word project, a mission, which is future-proofing the way we work for Randstad. So I'm leading this across the world of Randstad. And we are questioning the very notion of what you just asked me, Anurag. Do we need an office? Do we need office space? Now we know there are large global companies in India alone that have reduced their footprint significantly. One company announced they're reducing their space by 1 million square feet in India alone. Now, that's a bold decision. The assumption then is that the office no longer becomes as important as it was before COVID. What we do know is we're moving towards a hybrid way of working. Working from anywhere, working from home, working from remote will become more and more normal and accepted. And so I think the simple answer to your question is the office becomes less important as a place to do work. I believe that the office will be redesigned and repurposed as a place to collaborate and celebrate. There's a wonderful report, which I just read yesterday. I refer everyone on this webinar to check it out. It's the 2020 Global Culture Report by O.C. Tanner. Wonderful insights into exactly what Dr. Kalia just said. Talked about organizations where people feel safe physically and psychologically perform 3 to 4x better than their competitors. If you want to talk about measurable outputs, there's some really interesting data. That's O.C. Tanner 2020 Global Culture Report. It really is broken down into 3 phases, Anurag. As I said earlier, when I spoke to our clients, and we have more than 2,000 companies we work with in India right now actively, and I met with many CEOs and CHROs, CXOs, and so on. In March, April, it was all about safety. It was all about let's close our doors and make sure our people are safe. Then the question marks, how long will this last? Well, then we know what happened. No? And by the way, the modeling was telling us that this would peak in India sometime in mid-May. Then that was extended to mid-June, and then mid-July. Latest we heard from the Ministry of Health and Protiviti has done a modeling saying mid-November, and I'm sure Dr. Kalia has thoughts on this. The modeling is never going to be completely accurate because we still don't completely understand the virus and how it's spreading right now, particularly in India. So there was the first phase, which was respond, and we shifted to safety mode. The second phase was recover. Okay, how do we now navigate through this ambiguity, adversity? We don't know when this is going to end, but we do know we need to keep moving the wheels, protect lives and livelihood. The third phase right now is what we hear a lot about, reimagining. And it's really about proactively moving forward into this new world. My conversations now are quite inspiring with companies. The one big concern, other than the safety piece, which we are addressing through the handbook and so on, is the question of the workforce. So a lot of companies have been battling, and I would say CXOs, the thing that keeps them up at night right now, the ones I speak to, is what to do about the workforce. If we continue to face these challenges of the economy slowing or not regaining the momentum we had coming into 2020, then what do we do with our workforce? How do we handle it? Some companies reacted quickly, swiftly, and cut some of their workforce. What we're advising companies to do is do exactly the opposite. Protect your people, but rethink your workforce planning strategy. And this is where, and I just want to put on another hat for a moment, Anurag. While I'm CEO of Randstad, I'm also an executive board member of the India Staffing Federation, representing the more than 1.3 million contingent workers in the formal economy in India. And for a long time, temporary workers were the unprotected workforce, and we're working hard to make the unprotected protected. And what I've discovered is that many companies, Indian multinational, like small to extra large, are now embracing this notion of workforce planning, more strategic workforce planning, embracing contingent labor, increasing the piece of the pie within their workforce of contingent labor, and also looking at the gig worker and freelancing and so on. So in a way, crisis brings opportunity. When it comes to the nature of work in India, clearly we see changes emerging. Well, the 5 E's would stay the same, Anurag. I've been through lots of crises. I've been in, I was in Japan for 25 years. I had been through 2 massive earthquakes, including the tsunami and the nuclear meltdown. So crisis, there is something about leadership in crisis, which I think is timeless and borderless. So the 5 E's would stay the same, but I would have included these learnings that we've had over the past 6 months from this crisis, which again is unprecedented. I would have included anecdotes and stories and some of the inspiring experiences that I've had from this. And I probably will do that in a future edited version. I echo the point about resilience. We've all developed a new sense of resilience over the past few months, and agility. These are 2 competencies that will become more and more important for all of us. We need to find a way to measure them. But I would say that, if you look back, at least I can say growing up as a leader, I heard a lot about IQ as an indicator of potential success. And then this new thing came in called EQ, which was also an indicator. We realized it wasn't only about intelligence, but it was the ability to connect with people. But I believe the next one is coming right now, compassion quotient, CQ. The compassion quotient was something that many of us as leaders have ignored. And I would say that in this crisis and beyond, the leaders who will lead high-performing teams, the organizations that will continue to thrive through crisis and beyond, are the organizations that take care of their people. So I believe that we're going to be talking more and more about compassion for action, and organizations that have a high compassion quotient will do well through the crisis and beyond. So that's something I'm very interested in learning myself as a leader, a new muscle to build. There was 2 questions in there, isn't there? First of all, pre-COVID, I would have given the same answer when it comes to contingent labor and gig and so on. I'm a big believer that every organization needs to embrace various forms of work. And that's part of diversity, by the way, when we talk about diverse working workforce and work population, because that brings different perspectives, right? We also know that people have different stages in their lives where perhaps a gig or a temporary contract is more appropriate than a core full-time contract as well. What I do see, and we already see it, I can certainly comment on the data in Randstad in India. We have grown, our temporary contractual and gig business has grown steadily through this crisis. So that's an interesting observation, that indeed companies have realized that temporary and contractual and gig labor also provides the opportunity, the flexibility to upscale and downscale where necessary, while also protecting the business, the performance and the output. So I only see that increasing. The awareness is certainly on top of mind now for most of the CXOs I talk to. I think a lot of companies, more traditional companies, where again, it was all about presenteeism. Again, the world that many of us grew up in, right? Where you report to an office and you report on time and you're physically there. Well, those companies have had to make an extreme adjustment and shift to this new world, the more traditional companies. But I'm quite amazed at many companies that have gone from being very traditional and very analog to embracing tech, what we would say at Randstad, tech for touch. So I see that transition happening before my eyes right now here. That is going to be perhaps one of our biggest challenges moving forward. We just did a large intake of new grads into Randstad here. And just imagine being a new hire, a new grad, fresher coming into a company, very excited. And I sat down to have my welcoming town hall with this group of young folks. And I showed up in the attire I've been wearing every day to my internal meetings, which is a Randstad polo shirt, kind of casual actually. And they were all suited and booted, ready for business. And I thought, wow, this is a young, eager, aspiring group of people. And how do we engage with them without actually being with them? This is all brand new to us, Anurag. And I think we're learning as we go. But one thing we know is that, back to the compassion quotient, the leader that connects, that touches the people, using technology now at least, will have a better opportunity to create that culture. I think the other thing is, I mentioned earlier about tech for touch. We need to look at technology as a way to build that connection, right? And clearly, we need to also give people a voice. And what many leaders have done is fallen in the trap of micromanagement, because this was all new to us. We just started to manage calendars and manage schedules and make sure all the time was accounted for. But I believe that one way to address that is to go the opposite way, to give freedom in the frame, to give freedom to people to experiment. And ultimately, and I talk about this in my book, Anurag, about enabling, leader as enabler. I believe the leader of the future is all about enabling people to shine. Let them be their authentic self, as Karan had said. Let them be their true selves and let them shine. And ultimately, I think that's the way you build culture moving forward. It's no longer about the cool cafeteria at the office anymore. It's more about how we treat people. I must say, I really enjoyed today's conversation. Before we went live today, we talked about takeaways and golden nuggets. I've got a few here myself. I've taken a few notes, so thank you to my fellow panelists. I hope our listeners today and viewers have also taken away something that's helpful. I come back to the original comment about the new world. It's interesting. Jim Collins in the book Good Great talked about the Stockdale paradox, confronting the brutal facts, right? And it's about realizing that the COVID crisis will continue. COVID is unpredictable, there's ambiguity, there's adversity. Let's accept that, right? And by the way, the 5 stages of grief, if you remember those, the 5th one is acceptance. So we need to accept that we're in this situation right now, let's deal with it. And I'm a big believer, and this is a kind of a guiding principle I've carried with me through my life, that my parents taught me. 2 things. 1, you can't control what happens outside, but you can control how you react and how you respond. So we have a wonderful opportunity to respond in a way which is taking us to the future. And the final advice that my dad always gave me in tough times was, son, this too shall pass. And I believe this too shall pass, and we will get through it together, and we learn together. And again, that's why we're here today. I just want to say, Anurag, I'm getting a lot of messages here from people who have already downloaded the handbook. So thank you so much for downloading it, and you're finding it useful. That's good to know. Please, by all means, download the handbook, use it. It's for all of us, and we're all on the same mission, and that is to help India return to work and to the workplace safely.